This is in the Gilovich text. This is chapter 13 primarily. Most of the information is in chapter 13. So let's go ahead and get started. The need to justify our actions, the costs and benefits of dissonance reduction. So, on March 26, 1997, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult in Rancho Santa Fe, California, were found dead, participants in a mass suicide, 39 people. The cult members died willingly and peacefully and didn't really consider it suicide. They believed a spaceship behind the Hale-Bopp comet was their ticket to a new life in paradise. They bought an expensive telescope, but when members of the Heaven's Gate cult could not find a spaceship behind the comet, they returned their telescope for a refund. Their attitude was clear, and given their premise, their logic was impeccable. We know an alien spaceship is following behind the Hale-Bopp comet, and if an expensive telescope failed to reveal the spaceship, then there must be something wrong with the telescope. Generally speaking, the members of Heaven's Gate cult were not stupid, irrational, or crazy. Neighbors considered them pleasant, smart, reasonable people. They all worked in, what did they work in? They all worked in computers. They were all computer programmers. Their behavior was an extreme example of normal human tendency, the need to justify our actions. And there's the Hale-Bopp comet. I can remember when it was flying through the air, or we could see it anyway. It's always flying through the air. But I was living in Mississippi at the time, and we would go out and look at it on succeeding nights. It was fairly obvious. And then we are carting the 39 people out. We humans strive to maintain a relatively favorable view of ourselves, particularly when we encounter evidence that contradicts our typically rosy self-image. We would rather hear comforting lies than unpleasant truths. Most of us want to believe that we are reasonable, decent folks who make wise decisions, do not behave immorally, and have integrity. We want to believe that we do not do stupid, cruel, or absurd things. And he's going to touch a cactus with his tongue. Okay. Yeah. If we are confronted with information implying that we may have behaved in ways that are irrational, immoral, or stupid, we experience a good deal of discomfort. Cognitive dissonance is discomfort that people feel when two cognitions, beliefs, and attitudes conflict, or when they behave in ways that are inconsistent with their conception of themselves. Leon Festinger in 1957 was the first psychologist to deal with the phenomenon of cognitive dissonance, and he discovered that it always produces discomfort, and in response, we try to reduce it. There are three basic ways that we try to reduce cognitive dissonance: by changing our behavior to bring it in line with the dissonant cognition, by attempting to justify our behavior through changing one of the dissonant cognitions, by attempting to justify our behavior by adding new cognitions. Adding new cognitions, changing an idea, or bringing our beliefs in line with the new information. If someone is a smoker and they know that smoking harms one's health, they might relieve their dissonance by changing their behavior, quitting smoking. Way to go. You can rid yourself of the dissonance by changing your cognition. Smoking is enjoyable. It relaxes and relieves nervous tension. Smoking actually improves your health because it's enjoyable and it relieves tension. The smoker can attempt to justify their behavior by adding new cognitions. Look at my grandfather. He's 87 years old, and he's been smoking a pack a day since he was 12. That proves it's not always bad for you, obviously. Hey, Grandpa, way to go. Self-affirmations are distortions aimed at protecting one's self-image as a sensible, competent person. Self-affirmations help people feel good about themselves in spite of the fact that they engage in this destructive behavior. They might try to bolster their self-concept in a different domain. Yes, it is not very smart of me to be smoking, but you know, I'm a really very good at mathematics. Even though I added 4 plus 20 equals 420. Of course, 420 has something to do with marijuana. And 4 plus 20 does not equal 420. It equals 24. The process of reducing pain is largely unconscious. We are in a constant balancing act of trying to stay happy. We rationalize bad news to try to reduce our disappointment. I hate history anyway. The teacher hates me. That's why I flunked it. There we go. We're rationalizing. We're trying to reduce our dissonance. Impact bias is the tendency to overestimate the intensity and the duration of our emotional reactions to future negative events. When we think about the future, we overestimate how bad negative events like the end of a romantic relationship will make us feel. What we fail to recognize is that dissonance reduction often helps us bounce back quickly. Given that people have successfully reduced dissonance in the past, why is it that they are not aware that they will do so in the future? It is not very effective to hear ourselves say, I'll try to make myself feel better by convincing myself that the person who just rejected me is an idiot. It is more effective if we unconsciously transform our view of the interviewer. We feel better believing that objectively he is an idiot. Because the dissonance reduction process is mostly unconscious, we do not anticipate that it will save us from future angst. While Festinger found that any conflicting cognitions could cause dissonance, Aronson, 1969, the author of your textbook, discovered that the most painful, or the author of one of the two textbooks, Gilovich is the main author of the other textbook. Aronson discovered that the most painful dissonant cognitions are those about the self. When our self-concept or self-esteem is threatened, the cognition that violates our view of ourselves. Whoa. She grabbed her. I don't know that she stopped her from falling. Interesting picture, though. In any decision between two cars, two colleges, two potential lovers, the chosen alternative is seldom entirely positive and the rejected alternative is seldom entirely negative. So while making the decision, you have doubts. After the decision, your cognition that you are a smart person is dissonant with aspects that didn't fit your choice. And of course, this is me trying to decide whether to eat banana and apple snacks or drink a Code Red. Even though they have the same number of calories. They have the same amount of fat. Mountain Dew has more carbs, and the peeled snacks have more protein, and it's about the same calories. So they're equal, pretty much. When given a choice between two equal alternatives, the healthy mind will reduce the post-decision dissonance by downplaying the negatives of the chosen alternative, downplaying the positives of the rejected alternative. This was proven by Brehm in 1956. She's trying to decide whether to wear a white shirt, short-sleeve shirt, or a long-sleeved black shirt. Decisions. More dissonance is created when the decision is important. There is also more dissonance created when a decision is permanent. The more permanence to the decision, the more dissonance created. And of course, this is a situation where a young lady had to decide which guy she wanted to be with, and she chose the one in the middle, but maybe she wishes she chose the guy on the left. The next worst thing to hellfire is a bad marriage. Marrying the wrong person is like living with the devil himself. Wow. Salespeople use high-pressure techniques to make sales. In a technique known as lowballing, they will get you to agree to a low price for a standard vehicle. After you agree, then they start adding to the cost by adding needed accessories. Though the cost is more than you wanted to pay, you agree because you're already thinking about driving after the sale. Lowballing works because you've already made a sense of commitment. The sense of commitment triggers the anticipation of an exciting event. Price only slightly higher than the other prices elsewhere, and that makes a lot of sense. We face moral dilemmas on a relatively frequent basis. These dilemmas challenge our sense of self-esteem. Our decisions in these instances are likely to entail dissonance reduction, which will make us more or less ethical in the future. When a person decides to resolve a moral dilemma by being unethical, they can reduce their dissonance in two ways. According to dissonance theory, it is likely that they would try to justify the action by finding a way to minimize the negative aspects of the action you choose. You could adopt a more lenient attitude toward cheating, convincing yourself that it is a victimless crime that does not hurt anybody, that everybody does it, and so it's not really that bad. An individual who chooses to be ethical will suffer cognitive dissonance as well. They may justify losing what they would have gained by their unethical behavior by convincing themselves that the unethical behavior is worse than their loss. After rejecting the unethical behavior, they will be more adamant about remaining ethical. Recovering addicts very often become adamant critics of the substances that they used to abuse because of these types of dissonant justifications. Judson Mills in 1958 did research on sixth graders and gave them a chance to cheat. The ones who cheated became more lenient toward cheating. The ones who didn't cheat adopted a harsher attitude about cheating. According to Weston in 2006, people twirl the cognitive kaleidoscope until the pieces fall into the pattern that they want to see. Then the brain repays them by activating circuits involved in pleasure, not unlike what addicts feel when they get a fix. We can find dissonance operating in almost every part of the world, but it does not always take the same form, and the content of the cognitions that produce it may differ across cultures. In collectivist societies where the needs of the group matter more than the needs of the individual, dissonance-reducing behavior might be less prevalent, at least on the surface. In Japan, many people will vicariously experience dissonance on the part of someone that they know and like. The observer's attitudes will change to conform to that of their friends. When the behavior is being observed, empathy is reduced, but returns after the observation is over, the opposite pattern of Americans. In the United States, immigrant parents and their young adult children often clash over cultural values. The children want to be like their American peers. The parents want them to adhere to their ancestral culture. The dissonance for the children is profound. In a longitudinal study of Vietnamese and Cambodian adolescents in the United States, those suffering the most cognitive dissonance were the most likely to get into trouble, to do less well in school, and to fight more with their parents. When we put a great deal of effort into a project, and then the project does not appear to have been worthwhile, we can justify our efforts through a process called justification of effort, interpreting the ambiguous as the positive. The more effort, the stronger the justification. Justifications can be internal, changing something about themselves to reduce dissonance, or external. The reason for the dissonance is outside the person and involves an external result, such as a reward or avoiding punishment. Often, in order to be polite in society, we have to develop an opinion or attitude that runs counter to our own beliefs and attitudes, counter-attitudinal advocacy. When we do this with little external justification, we may begin believing the lie that we are told. Festinger and Carl Smith in 1959 discovered that when you offer someone a large external reward to go against their beliefs, they justify the change with the large reward and don't change their beliefs. But when a small external reward is offered, the individual's beliefs are more likely to change. This is because in order to perform the task with such a small reward, a change of attitude has to take place. This individual can't rationalize their behavior because of the large reward. Festinger and Carl Smith experiment has been replicated many times using a myriad of beliefs, but always with the same results. The smaller the incentive, the greater the softening of the attitude. Since there is little external justification, the justification has to be internal. Harsh punishment tends to teach us to try to avoid getting caught. When the child is refraining from doing something he wants to do, and while he does have some justification for not doing it, he lacks complete justification. In this situation, he continues to experience dissonance. Therefore, the individual must find another way to justify their actions. Punishment works in a similar manner to rewards. When the punishment is small, the individual is required to justify their behavior internally, and it is more likely to change the way they think. The only way to justify your behavior is by self-persuasion. This is known as insufficient punishment. Aronson and Carl Smith in 1963 wanted to follow up on the severe and mild punishment paradigm. They threatened severe and mild punishment for children who played with a select toy. They discovered the same cognitive processes in action with the children and the toys. The children who had received a severe threat continued to rate the forbidden toy as highly desirable or more desirable than they had before the threat. The children in the mild threat condition needed internal justification to reduce their dissonance. They convinced themselves the reason they had not played with the toy was that they did not really like it. They rated the forbidden toy as less attractive than they had when the experiment began. If you want someone to do something or not to do something only once, the most effective strategy would be to promise a large reward or threaten severe punishment. But if you want someone to become committed to an attitude or behavior, the smaller the reward or punishment that will lead to momentary compliance, the greater the eventual change will be, and therefore the more permanent. Large rewards and severe punishments as strong external justifications encourage compliance but prevent real attitude change. President Bill Clinton was about to be impeached by Congress for a sexual liaison he had with a White House intern. Righteous indignation swept through the conservative right as Speaker Newt Gingrich readied the gavel to begin proceedings. But before the gavel could come down, it was revealed that Gingrich himself had divorced twice because of an affair, and a long-standing affair was still hot and heavy. But Livingston readied to take the speakership and strike the proceedings until it was disclosed that he too was in a long-term affair. So here we have Newt Gingrich and Bob Livingston. Both of them are hypocritical. Dennis Hastert is the man who gavelled in the impeachment proceedings. Dennis Hastert is currently imprisoned for 4 counts as a serial child molester from years of molesting members of his high school wrestling team. Hastert was caught because of illegal banking practices paying hush money. So here we have 3 people that are three individuals that were ready to condemn Bill Clinton for having an affair with a White House intern. Turned out that Newt Gingrich wasn't innocent, Bob Livingston wasn't innocent, and certainly Dennis Hastert, who's actually in prison, wasn't innocent either. Hypocrisy is where an individual states a position to the point of preaching and then does the opposite in practice. Do as I say and not as I do, but a great deal more extreme. Ted Haggard was a multimillionaire evangelist who was a darling of the religious right and an advisor to President George W. Bush. He preached against adultery, homosexuality, sex before marriage, and abortion. Therefore, everyone was surprised when he was caught in a drug-fueled 13-year gay relationship that included multiple partners. Hypocrisy is a form of the fundamental attribution error. Hypocrites judge others as worse than they are themselves, even though they perform the same or worse than the people they are condemning. Hypocrites are somewhat narcissistic and rationalize their own shortcomings and condemn those of others. Hypocrisy induction is making people aware of their hypocrisy, causing them cognitive dissonance. Research by Takaku in 2006 showed that when people are made aware of their hypocritical dissonance, they go quickly from anger to forgiveness. Dissonance theory predicts that when we dislike someone, if we do them a favor, we will like them more. Ben Franklin was able to make an enemy a friend by doing him a favor. After the favor, both Franklin and his former enemy liked each other. This is known as the Ben Franklin effect. During World War I, we were fighting against the Germans, and we called them Huns and Krauts. And of course, every time we get into a conflict with someone, we try to dehumanize that individual, making it easier for us to attack them and potentially kill them. So we try to make them look like some kind of non-human individual. Okay, and as you can see, this is a German? Really? Yeah, anyway. Jap, you're next. Buy extra bonds. What's going on? Go away. No, go away. There we are. Okay. And of course, this is the way we saw the Japanese. He's carrying a naked woman. He's about to stab a woman. Soldiers eat babies. That's a fact. Think of the children. Join Team Demoman today and make those monsters pay. Don't kid yourself. It's up to you to stop him. Look how crazed Hitler looks. Our work will win or lose this war. Dehumanizing the enemy. Fighting an enemy is still fighting another human with all the attributes of any other human. Often this can only be done if the enemy is dehumanized. It happens in every war and often as propaganda before combat begins. Such prejudice makes ruthlessness and cruelty easier. Cruel behavior is dissonant with our view of self as a decent human being. If we harm someone, this creates dissonance between what we did, inflict pain on another person, and our view of ourselves as a decent person. To resolve the dissonance, we may come to hate our victim and engage in dehumanization. By convincing ourselves that our victim is less than human, we reduce the dissonance. All too often, prejudice is rationalized in much the same way, by dehumanizing the target population. This has been the fate of just about any minority in the United States at one point or another. Dehumanization of outgroups, minorities, or enemies is an unfortunately common way of reducing dissonance. On May 14th, 2022, fascist and white supremacist Peyton Gendron traveled over 200 miles to attack a black neighborhood grocery in Buffalo, New York. He was able to kill 10 people and wound 3. His motivation was hate for black people, who he was afraid were going to replace the white race in the United States. This is also known as the Great Replacement Theory. In an act of ultimate cognitive dissonance, Gendron's best friend is Hispanic Matthew Casado, who has a black girlfriend. The 3 friends would hang out together frequently. Gendron stored extra ammunition and a high-powered rifle at Casado's house before he made his trip to Buffalo. Cognitive dissonance. And he has just been tried and sentenced to life without parole. Gendron has. And that is the end of the lecture. So next week we'll tackle chapter 7.